We're recording.
Welcome to the August 6th, 2025 Finance and Capital Subcommittee of the Brookline School Committee. Is that our official name, Betsy, or are we just called Finance now?
Well, maybe we should talk about that. We'll figure that out.
Okay. Very good. And we'll get started on the agenda. So the first item is review and approval of the July 11th, 2025 Finance Subcommittee minutes. Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Sure.
Okay, Jesse, how do you vote?
I have a question.
Oh, go for it.
I guess this is the discussion part.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so there was a follow-up item in section 2 that states Ms. Fitzpatrick will share these questions with Greg Porter and Jen Martin for clarification and answers. This had to do with a question I brought up around the genocide education grant at that meeting, and I haven't heard anything in a month. So I'm just wondering, was that done? And if so, is there any clarification, answers, or an update?
We did give answers to the questions the next day before we voted this in full committee. You had asked about the LEA size, and we were told that it's by LEA size, not just by the.
Yeah, that we answered.
Yep. And then there was another question, which I'm just going to look back at the.
I think I had a question, Mariah, about how that fit into the framework that
Right, and that all was,
and that
we
was
had discussed putting that at
Yep.
curriculum in a
Yep.
future date. So
Yep.
there was the specific grant questions that were answered beforehand, and then there was the bigger question that was to be addressed in a future curriculum subcommittee meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Ready for Jesse? How do you vote?
Yes.
Donna,
yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, next item on the agenda is review of position control report. Betsy, do you mind pulling it up? And Susan, Donna's on the subway, but she had asked for if we could just go through it a little bit more, like explaining the headers and all of that a little bit more before we just dive right into the content.
I think just to clarify, I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I actually was hoping we could do a quick overview of the process by which this report is produced so that I can understand what the inputs are and that I'm aligned with whatever, whatever information sources are shared. I'm understanding that part of things.
So maybe I can give a little bit of the overview of why we do this, and then Susan can talk about how she does it.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay. So this is basically the thing that fills in from budget to budget what the changes are in FTEs that happened during the year. And it was really great because this was only I think last year, Susan, was the first year we had this. And in prior years, we would see one budget, and then when you go to look next year, there might be a change, but we didn't know where it had come from or why. And so there was sort of this like closes the loop on the budget to budget changes so that we have this running tally of what has changed and why. And so from our perspective, I think it's really valuable because as people who are looking on the budget from one year to the next, that way we're not like lost when we're trying to understand why things might have changed. And so that's very valuable. And then I guess Donna, does that help explain the why? And then Susan can talk about the how.
It's super, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. It's super helpful. And I also want to make sure that I'm reiterating that the reason I'm asking these questions is because I'm new to this subcommittee. And I just want to make sure that whatever information existing members have, as well as whatever amazing information Susan and the department has that goes into this report, is something that I'm keeping in the back of my mind. So I'm not over asking questions or, like I'm aligned and understanding again, like what the inputs are. So yes, that's super helpful.
Great. Oh, and I just want to say one other thing. Well, Susan can talk about this, but I'll just say that the nice thing about this is it tells us both FTEs and dollars. So that's a nice feature, and like where those dollars would come from, because we don't always have them in the budget. And so the staff is in the back end looking at this. So it's really great for us to have like a very high level perspective from the school committee. Okay, Susan. So now the how.
Okay, so internally, there are occasions when we need to add staff after the budget has been approved. And when that occurs, so let's say we have a student that requires additional services, perhaps they need additional OT, PT, speech, and or we need to hire a paraprofessional, et cetera. Then there's a process internally where a principal or a director can request a position. They request it of the deputy that oversees their particular area. So if it's OSS, it goes to Karen. If it's OTL, it would go to Robin. They review that request, and then they ask questions. It's vetted through them. They sign off, and part of the process of their signing off is to identify where the funding would come from. Sometimes we're making a reduction in one area and adding in another. Sometimes we're adding a new staff member, but it's coming out of the extra sections we set aside. And so they identify that. It comes to me, I review it and I approve it. It's put on this. We set them up with a PCN. And if we're eliminating a PCN, which is a position control number, then that position control number is eliminated. So this is a very important internal control that we have, and this is the report where we share out the changes that have occurred on a month-to-month basis. So every meeting, I present this report to you. And so the first column represents the new position that's been requested and the FTE associated with it. The next column is location, so that's the location where the new position will now live. And the next column represents the reason for it. So if we're looking at the social studies, we added a 0.4 at BHS for programmatic reasons, meaning they did the scheduling and they were short based on enrollments in courses. They needed an additional 0.4 FTE in social studies. And so we funded that through extra sections, which sits in the Office of Administration and Finance's budget. The net cost is zero because we had the money in the budget. We're moving it now from OAF into the high school, and it's funded through. So the fund type, it's all of these right now are general fund, but it could be that it came out of a grant or a revolving fund or some other source, and I would tell you that there, so you can keep track of it. And then the last column represents what month the action occurred in. So this is the only one we've had in August. Anything that happens between now and the next report would then be September's activity. So that's how you read it, and that's the process that we follow internally in order to add positions after the budget has been approved. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's super helpful. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions so that I understand some of the detail? When you are saying, for example, with that social studies, that first line, the social studies teacher, and it's a programmatic need. So am I understanding that it's the vetting that's happened means it's already gone through essentially like the principal or whoever's the decision maker that they need an extra section in that space?
Yes.
Like that person has already sort of like reviewed it and said, yes, we definitely need that, or no, we don't need that. Like that vetting has already happened. Is that right?
Yes. So the principal in this case would be the one that requested it.
Yeah.
High school principal requested it after he and his team, went through the process of setting up the master schedule. And then it goes to the Office of Teaching and Learning in this case. And then they review it and ask any kind of questions that they feel are relevant and important. And then they identify the funding source. So the deputy identifies the funding source. They send it along to me. If everything's in order, I approve it, and then it gets added to this list, and then we set it up in the system. We sunset, if we're eliminating a position, which sometimes happens. So I'll give another example. In this case, we're taking the extra sections, but let's say the high school principal had said, I need a 0.4 in social studies, but I don't need all the sections that I had set aside for math, right?
Right.
So another scenario could be that it says it's 0.4 social studies that we're setting up, but when it comes to funding source, it could also be that it's coming from the math department, 0.4. In which case it's still 0, but at least you get to see where we're making the adjustments from. In this case, he needed all the sections we had set aside, all of the other academic areas, and this is an additional 0.4 that he needed in order to run his master schedule.
And is it also true when I'm reading this that would have to be in either the middle school or maybe the high school? Because if it was the elementary school, it would be a section, like a section collapsing or something like that. Like, in other words, like the 3 lines that you have under grade 5, grade 2, grade 3. I'm so sorry about the noise on the T. That means that's in the elementary school because they need an extra teacher, like a full-time educator, like 1 full FTE.
In those particular cases, yes. So when we looked at enrollment information, back in the late spring, after the budget was passed, there were some enrollments that were lower than we had anticipated when we put the budget together in January. And there were also some cases where enrollments were higher in certain grades. And in those 3 cases, we collapsed 3 sections where we were under-enrolled, and we added a section in another location where we were over-enrolled, so that we could keep the average class sizes at either below 22 or below 25, depending on whether it was, upper elementary or lower elementary. So in those cases, we could collapse, but sometimes we can't. So when it says like the computer teacher is another example, right? At the Lincoln School, we added a computer teacher there. It had been cut the prior year, but when the principal was doing his scheduling, they needed to add this position back. So in that case, there wasn't a position collapsed. We used extra sections. So if we don't have a place where we can reduce, and we don't reduce unless there's not a need for it, right? When we're putting the budget together back in January, then of course we don't know exactly what the enrollment's going to be. And so we're giving, a staffing plan based on the information we have at the time that ties to the number of sections that we anticipate we're going to need. But then in practice, as we get to see what the enrollments are actually looking like, and or potentially students move in and have needs, then we have to kind of course correct. It's totally typical in a school district to have these kinds of adjustments that are made as you get closer to the opening of the school year. This year, I really took a good look at the enrollment information as we were getting to the end of the year, because I wanted to be able to post for any positions that were open. And also if we were collapsing and there was an opening, that we weren't hiring into a position that we no longer needed. So I try to keep a good eye on this in the spring so that, we're hiring where we need staff and not, over hiring or because we don't have a need in one area and we recognize a need in another.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So is it safe to say that the position control report is essentially or ultimately the source of truth when it comes to sections?
Changes in the
So-
sections, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And is it also true then that requests for either collapsing or adding a section are also typically originating at the school, and then it's vetted at the local level and then it comes up to you, or how does that?
Sometimes when we're looking at at the elementary level, we look at all of that together. And so in the case of the elementary, we had kind of a leadership meeting where we reviewed this together collectively so that we could make sure we had our eyes on all aspects of changes. And so we did that that was more of a group conversation that took place then, which is why I could make a connection between like, these are the ones we're collapsing. This is after conversation of, among the principals, not in isolation. Because they're also in the process of hiring at the same time. So we really need to all be on the same page and, using the same information to make our decisions. So in the elementary schools back in June, all of those decisions were made as a group.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then do you remember, I think it was last June, because it was during one of my first school committee member meetings, there were parents and caregivers that came out of, I can't remember, I think it was Driscoll. No, it was FRR, about a second grade section that was collapsed. I can't remember the history, but when we as school committee members are hit with something like that, then we know either it's gone through this process for the position the process that results in the position control report, right? Like it's already gone through all that vetting.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
it does do that. And so what you probably recall when you came on board was that there were a number of meetings that parents were requesting an additional teacher at the Driscoll School because they were concerned about rising class size. And you also heard that at the second grade, Rough and Ridley. I think there was another school where we were getting a little bit of activity on, but in the end, it did not, the enrollments actually didn't bear out to require an additional section. So we look at it as a group. We want to make equitable and timely decisions. So also, when we did that, did make the decisions on the sectioning, the principals communicated out at noontime on Friday simultaneously so that there wouldn't be, families wondering, hey, did mine get approved? So the principals were good about communicating out to their various communities when the section was added so that there would be clarity and consistency and communication.
Okay, that is, thank you for taking all the time to sort of walk me through the inputs and all of that. I think it's really helpful for a new school committee member and someone who's new. I don't know if Jesse, you feel the same way, but someone who's new to finance to understand like how you end up with this report and what information goes into it and what the process is. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have maybe a follow-up question or two, Susan.
Sure.
I just want to be conscientious of time overall, so maybe we can spend like 5 more minutes on this.
Sure. So in a case like Baker, where like when we got this material, it was the first, at least for me, that I knew that there was going to be a section collapse at Baker, right? That's how I'm reading the report. So the original kindergarten enrollment numbers that were in the budget guide that we got when we started on the budget was like 67 students or something. So what we're saying is that did not materialize.
Mhm.
And so that's why the principal now at Baker came back and said, I can accommodate that because Driscoll is growing a little more. Is that the idea?
They're not looked at, the Baker School is kind of horse trading with Driscoll. It doesn't really happen that way. But what we do look at is, so one of the things that is a little bit unique about Brookline is that we have these buffer zones. So when
Right.
we're looking at capacity at grade level, we also are looking at the buffer zone and what's happening by grade level. So in this particular case, when we look at the number of openings at Baker, we're seeing, I think when I counted it at that time, we had 35 slots open at the Baker School. Well, you were never going to get that many slots filled between, there's no world in which we would have that much of a churn that in migration would, right? And so,
Right. I hear you. Okay.
yeah. But but the 35 includes how many at kindergarten are at the Hayes School because they're buffer zones, right? And
Yes.
so we're also looking to see what's going on at the Hayes School at the same time because we don't want to overcompensate, right? Or cut Baker and compromise, haze, right? We got to look at it simultaneously. So in that case, I remember, so we look at them in groupings, and we look them at not only in the school, but in the buffer zones and what we see going on.
So, okay, and just so that I heard what you said to Donna correctly, for example, the parents in any of the, I guess it's Baker, Hayes, and Lawrence, they've been notified or something like around now that there's a section collapse so that they're aware of it before school starts? Is that a normal thing from their principals?
The principals are responsible for communicating out to the teachers. We don't do that to the teachers and then to the parents. Yeah, that's not something we do at the district level.
Got
But I
it.
think Jesse's question is, Driscoll, Ruffin, Ridley, and Runkle were notified of the addition. Are the other schools notified of the
Yeah.
collapse?
Oh,
That's
yes,
right.
they knew when we left the meeting which ones were
Well, the
collapsed.
principals know. Does the school community get notified?
That's my question. Yes, Maura.
That's my understanding, yeah, that the principals communicate. And to the best of my knowledge, they did communicate in those cases.
So just to understand that again, because I mean, being in the Hayes district, I might hear from parents soon. In the 5th grade, we projected 49 students, and you're saying there's fewer, I guess, that you can collapse, because that would give you 24 and a half students per the 2 grades. Now it was a 3-section grade. So the 4th graders were 44, so now we're going down essentially to 22 or something. If it was 2 sections before, and one in the projection in the budget. So what happened? That it was a section collapse of grade 5. These are students entering grade 5. So I understand the report here.
Yes,
So these are the 44 students that are matriculated into grade 5.
right.
So it was only a 2-section. 5th grade was going to be 3 sections. So now it's going to only be 2 sections. That's how to explain this.
Yes.
And the teacher who is going to be the 3rd section of 5th grade, what happens to that teacher?
That teacher, because at that point in time, we owe them a position. That's what I'm talking about in terms of hiring. And this is why we have those conversations. We see where they are, what their levels of certification are, what they've taught in the past, and what they have experience with. If we have an opening in the same grade level, another school,
Sure.
we would offer that person that position.
But
So-
wouldn't that opening show in the position control report? Or not really?
No,
Those
Okay.
are already existing positions, Jesse.
They're
They're just
existing,
getting
okay.
slotted into an existing
Okay.
position.
So the assumption is that we found a position for that 3rd teacher, Mariah? Is
yes.
that?
Yeah, we
Okay,
had an opening and nobody was riffed after that. We'd also made a commitment to the union, if you recall, that after the deadline for notifications for riffs, that we wouldn't riff any
Sure.
teacher after that point. So no, we didn't. We honored that agreement, and anyone that was would have been displaced at that time was placed in another position.
so, okay, I guess my final question then, because Mariah said she wants to move on, is so when would the school committee receive an updated set of tables on the class sizes and sections? Since, of course, the one we have was dated February of 2025, right? That's the one that has school by school what their projections were. So it's now, exactly 6 months
Jesse,
later.
those are typically delivered only like in November, that detailed table.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those are only like the October 1 freeze data is submitted to Desi. And then Desi goes back and forth with Brookline and makes sure no one's double counted. And that takes a couple of weeks. And then once it's finally generated, those tables are produced like for, we'll say, end of October, early November, somewhere in that window.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's why I was asking Jesse
Yeah.
that essentially this position control report becomes the source of truth, as opposed to that
But
table that
that
you're referring
table
to.
has enrollments in it.
Right, it's different, Donna,
That's
because
right.
we don't,
Oh, it doesn't have sections.
like,
It doesn't
it
go
could
by
be,
sections.
It has
it went from
sections in the
5 sections to
elementary
4
school,
sections.
but it only has classroom sections, and some of these
Right.
positions aren't classroom positions, and at the high school level,
Right.
it's not broken down by section, it's total student counts.
But in terms of, am I right when I say that in terms of sections in the elementary school, the
Yeah.
position control report is the source of truth?
It would, yes, it would tie to that.
Change,
Yeah.
right, of change, right.
Okay, Sarah, I'm giving you the last word, and I really hope you'll make it like a 30-second last word.
One of the conversations that Susan and I had at Expenditures and Revenue had to do with when in the school year we will know if we're seeing a change in international students. And for some reason, out in the community, people are already quoting that that our schools are down 700 students this year, and like at the Lawrence School, they're down a full 100 students. I assume that what I'm hearing isn't good hard facts, but and I also think that you and I have already discussed that we're not going to know about those international students until like that October 1st date. But do you have a little bit of a feeling of how that forecast is going to go? Are we seeing fewer international students returning to our schools?
Right now enrollment is in the height of churn, so I really don't have any better information to share right now. If they're up, they're down, yeah, I don't know where it's gonna land yet. There's a lot of activity, I can tell you, and there typically is right now.
Yep, thank you. That's what you and I had said last time we spoke about
Yeah.
this, is that all the way through September, we'll be seeing that activity. I just
Right.
want to double check back in. Thank you.
Yep. And by the way, I don't know where that 700 number came from.
You know, I've heard it twice, but I don't know where it comes from either.
Yeah,
So definitely not a PSB official number. People are getting it from somewhere. Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, you're saying though, but Mara, to your point, that we will have an official number like around the first week of October, like in 2 months. Because then by then we know like it's settled. We know, I mean, there may be students still coming in from other countries, but by then it should.
People come in and out all year
Oh,
long, but that
right.
is the quota, that is the official number.
Yeah, so we'll have some idea then.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. We're gonna skip approval of grants and gifts for now and jump down to capital. So this is the update on the deferred maintenance request. And Joe, I think, thinks that we all have like telescopes built into our
Yeah, must
eyeballs
be,
'cause this is really
is
hard
hard.
to read.
They're keeping it to one page, no matter how small, right? Yeah, is this related, Mariah, to the message we sent to Charlie Simmons to get
Mhm.
some idea of the
Mhm.
meeting that didn't happen yet? Okay,
Right, yes.
all right.
Susan, are you gonna cover this?
I will. So in the summertime, the Director of Operations, Joe Albuquerque, he meets with the principals to review what they have for emerging needs in their school from a facility standpoint. And he puts together the requests from the principals, and or if a director or a deputy or anyone else has any concerns or needs. And then it is summarized. Now, typically what happens when we get this request summarized, we send this off to Charlie, which we did again this year. Charlie reviews it, and he provides the estimated costs. Once he provides the costs, Joe and Charlie and I meet, and then we review the priorities. And based on the priorities and the estimates, we identify what belongs in deferred maintenance, what might be funded through other accounts that Charlie has, what might be repair and maintenance, et cetera. And then we take what is deferred maintenance and we put it into this 5-year plan based on what these needs are. So this information is essentially what the principals and the director of operations have identified as emerging needs since the last report that we provided and was approved back in September of October of last year. So unfortunately, Charlie's on vacation, and so he's not here to answer questions. And Joe had a family emergency and is not with us this evening. So I can't get into any depth with you about some of them. But essentially, this is what we have before Charlie to give us some pricing. when Charlie gets back from vacation next week, he'll give us a date, and then we'll continue with our process of vetting and identifying how these various projects will be funded. And then we'll come back to you with the standard CIP. Attached to this, if you scroll down, there's 3 pages. So this is a 2-page document. And then the last item is what was approved last year from the CIP. So you have a reference point. And so this is what we would bring to you next. We'd obviously, on this particular one, we would eliminate any of the projects completed in 25 because they're not relevant. We would put in which projects were completed in 26, and then we would add all the new items, just as we did this year. And Charlie would be here to answer questions about his project work in the summertime, what the costs came in at, and if there's any money left from the CIP. But I don't have that information for you tonight because Charlie wasn't available.
So while this is displayed here, Susan, for example, Hayes bathroom renovations on this page for FY26 deferred maintenance looks like it's not going to get, it'll be 2 more years because it looks like he put that there's money there for 28 and 29. That is in a CIP. It's not necessarily approved money, right? It's an ask.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
okay, so that's repair and maintenance.
This is for deferred. So most of the information on this one is the tab for deferred maintenance, not repair and maintenance, but deferred maintenance, because my understanding is this was born out of the town getting not having adequate funding in the repair and maintenance line over time.
Right.
And so they got backed up, and this account was set up to try to get caught up a bit. That's my understanding.
Okay. Yeah, I wrote Charlie a message today. I didn't know he was on vacation about that particular item due to complaints from parents in the district about the bathrooms never working, for a year. So I'm saying I thought maintenance would cover that, but I won't hear back from him, I guess, until he returns.
Yes, and that's true. If something occurs during the year, there is a repair and maintenance budget separate and aside from this that Charlie manages on our behalf. So this is not the only bucket. This is just the capital improvement component, where they set aside funds for projects that are over 25,000. And in this case, one of the lines is deferred maintenance, and that's kind of the catch-up fund. But he does have a repair and maintenance account, and he also has several other separate buckets of money for things like HVAC, if there's an ADA compliance challenge that arises, roofing. He has other buckets of money that are set aside that he can access to. But Charlie would have to really walk you through and explain how
Yeah,
that
well, we're trying. Yeah, I think Mariah and I were planning to meet with him. So thank you.
Yep.
And it should definitely be with PSB staff
Yeah.
conversation, but and maybe even just with PSB staff or whatever. But hang on one second, Carol. Yeah, I just wanted to make clear that, if you recall, Charlie, we had long discussions about the PSB buildings budget. So if you recall, Jesse, there's millions of dollars that goes towards fire alarm testing and other painting and such. But even this year, we held it flat compared to last year, but we have done a huge amount of work to make it bigger over the past 5 years. But the part of the issue and where this deferred maintenance comes from is that it really, for many years, was quite insufficient to maintain the buildings. And so a huge effort has been done over the past 5 or so years to do much better on understanding what the projects are that are on the list and how that ties out over a plan for multiple years of funding, so that everyone understands what's being done when, and that also lets them coordinate, for example, if Runkle's going to have a whole bunch of work done in blah, blah, blah summer, then that means that building's offline. And so they know summer programs can't be scheduled there and so forth. So there's a whole intricate dance that this level of 6-year planning really helps everyone get on the same page for. So that's nice. Carol, go ahead.
First, I just want to thank Susan for adding in priority rankings, which I think is really important for the rest of the finance community that's trying to look at this, and I think it really helps. And then the last thing, I just want to caution, I know some of these specifically say not deferred maintenance, but there are some things on it that look like they're a sort of a change in requirements, like the gender neutral bathrooms. I wouldn't call those classically deferred maintenance. And I think as a town or for public buildings, we're going to need a tighter definition as to what's really deferred maintenance, what's ongoing maintenance, and what's a new capital improvement project. That's not your problem. I just want you to know that that's been a discussion that we've had on the capital subcommittee of the AC. So if you get pushback on some of these things not being deferred maintenance, even if Charlie finds money in a deferred maintenance budget, it might not really conform with the true definition of that. So, but thank you so much, Susan, for the prioritization. And then my other question is, in December of last year, you put in a request for how to redirect some of the money. And I was wondering how, which didn't get approved at the time, and Charlie said he'd look at it after everything in FY25 was done. And I was just wondering, how does this list tie out to the list that you presented back in December of 2024?
We don't have, so this is what was approved by the school committee and brought forward to the town for the capital improvement plan last year. You're right, in the end, funding doesn't always align with what the school committee moves forward. Charlie has not given us an accounting of the projects for this year, so I really can't answer that question until he provides us with more information. So I can't really speak to that.
So let me ask you this. Have there things that were in your December 2024 list that have fallen off of this list that aren't showing completed, that were new requests? Or is everything that you requested in December included in this list, whether it's been completed in this fiscal year or not?
Yeah, so the list that you're looking at right now is the list that we moved forward last year with all of our requests on it at that time. There is another section, but this was the deferred maintenance component. We also had requested money for the capital improvement assessment, an allocation for gender neutral bathrooms. And I think there was a third thing that's escaping me right now that were outside of this. And to your point, what I've been trying to do is clean up what and define deferred maintenance as deferred maintenance and not have separate projects in it. What the first document that we reviewed is for new requests. That's not all deferred maintenance. Those are just the new requests from principals. Okay, so I just want to be clear, they're not new deferred maintenance, but in fact, all of the requests, when we sit down with Charlie, we'll figure out what's deferred maintenance, what should be a separate project, to your point, you know. But this is from the administration, what the emerging needs since last year's cycle. All of them, deferred maintenance or otherwise.
Got it. Thanks so much for that clarification.
Yep.
Thanks, Susan, for this. I have one question, which is we heard from several Baker School community members about the air conditioning, I think on the top floor of Baker. And I wanted to check, it might not be showing up in the deferred maintenance list. I'm not really sure where it would be, but I guess I just want to maybe not check, but put a flag in, making sure that we'll be able to respond to the community members about, you know, what the timeline is, whether it's in Charlie's HVAC line or whether it's in deferred. I just don't know where it stands, but it would be great, not now, but to make sure we're being responsive to that concern.
Yes, I know on the new request, there's a specific request for air conditioning in a particular area of Baker.
It was
But-
grade 1, yeah, at the top.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was like the top floor. The wording we got back was like the top floor, so.
And that's our question over here. We have all these rooms listed.
Yeah.
I just, you know.
Okay, this is
don't-
helpful. I want to make sure that we're raising that concern again, so it doesn't slip through the cracks, given the community concern about it. So thank you for
Absolutely.
that.
one other thing too, last year we had, a number of people raise concerns about the entry, at Lawrence. And, that's not in the realm of building, so that's in DPW, world, but that is being, uh, repaired right now. So when school opens, the entrance at Lawrence School will have been, repaired.
Oh,
So
so that's all like the cracks and the issues
Yep.
with, okay,
Yep.
that's great.
Yep.
That was, yeah, a little rough. Thanks for that update.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions on this for now?
Can I just mention too that, so according to the timeline, we need to, have the recommendation, move from our, whatever the final recommendation is, move from this finance subcommittee to the school committee and then to the town by, I think it's the 12th of September. So we'll have to have another meeting. I don't want to hedge when that will be until Charlie gets back and we schedule the meeting, the staff meeting where Joe and he and I sit down and kind of work our way through all of this. But also, it will be good timing because, when we get to the grants part, we did get our grant allocations from the state for our title grants, our ESSA grants. And I'm gonna want, to be able to move those through as soon as possible so that we can open the year with the grants, having been processed and ready for us to, use when the school opens, if possible. So I'm
Okay.
just,
I know in our in our document, our shared document, there's a meeting penciled in for August 27th, which is 3 weeks from today. But I think that as you're saying, like if you don't meet with Charlie, if you don't have something to present on this, we have to wait until you have that ready. So,
yeah, but either way, I don't want to delay the grants.
okay,
Because, yeah, I don't want to delay the grants.
okay,
With all the challenges we've had, we're in a good place. And we're, so anyways, talk more
Okay.
about that at an upcoming meeting, but.
I know that it sounds like Jesse was interested in joining your staff meeting if possible, and I would be curious to join too. Just like,
Yep.
because I know that like if we have any questions for Charlie and if just in case he can't join the meeting, then at least we would get the chance to close the loop. But that's up to you, how you handle that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just don't know his availability yet, so
Okay,
happy to loop back.
thank you. Okay, next item, I think we're gonna go back to review and approval of grants and gifts. We have 5 items to consider. The first is the FY 26 Metco grant for 2,387,684. The second is the Coordinated Family and Community Engagement Grant for 139,874, although I have a question about that dollar amount, so we'll come back to that. The third one is from the state for enhanced school health services for 90,000 for this fiscal year and 90,000 for next fiscal year. The fourth is a federal grant for career and technical education for 73,278. And then the fourth, but it's actually first in our packet, is the gift from an anonymous donor, which is the latest in a multi-year series of gifts to support zero waste initiatives in PSB food services for $80,000. So why don't we start, as you can see, with the first one that's on the screen. Donna, is your question specifically about the zero waste?
Actually, my questions, I had two like general questions about grants, so I'm happy to hold them.
Why don't you start with those and then we
Okay.
can go through the other ones.
I'm gonna share both of them.
Mhm.
My kids are so loud, I'm sorry. What's the interplay between any stipends or I don't know what we call it, extra compensation that's outlined in any grants? How does that connect to, again, in one of my first meetings, there was a memo that had outlined like hourly rates for extra compensation. Do those two things, are they aligned in any way? In other words, am I being clear?
You are, I think. Susan, can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. So there's two, places where we draw information from, to pay extra compensation. One is the collective bargaining agreements, and in the back, I think it's Appendix B. There's a whole host of stipends that are listed there. If they're not in a CBA, then the non-aligned extra compensation comes into play, right? So between the two, typically any stipends that we pay out in terms of extra comp would be either under the CBA, dictated by the CBA, or what you approve annually for these other extra compensation, whether it's stipends or hourly rates for employees.
Susan, are the rates sort of similar, or can they vary?
Well,
between
the ones in the CBA, the collective bargaining agreements, are negotiated. And so when we're setting the ones for non-aligned, we do try to look at some measure of consistency. So let's say stipends, you try to look at what the workload is, the amount of hours that are spent on a particular activity, responsibilities associated with it. So we've done a lot of work trying to get some consistency and equity between that.
So
Is
is
it
that
perfect
also-
right now? Probably not, but I know that it's on our radar to take another look at that on the non-aligned in this
Yeah.
upcoming season.
So is that also true? So for example, when I'm reviewing like grant requests and there are stipends included in there, are the rates of pay for those stipends consistent with what we approved in that memo? I keep forgetting the name of it.
I wouldn't make parallels between the
Okay.
two.
But I'm
Okay.
confused, Susan. The memo that we approved, like any stipend that's issued, either is approved by the school committee, either through the CBA or through the stipends list. So the
Correct.
funding for stipends that might be available in a grant is still in alignment with those two documents that prevail, essentially.
So you said that much simpler than I did.
Okay. So
And
yeah,
at-
it's not
and
that-
at the
so
same
Donna
time-
shouldn't assume like when a grant says stipends, the stipends that would be funded through the grant are still according to those documents, Donna. Like those documents govern who gets how much.
Okay.
And at the same time, Mariah, I think that we all agree that it is something that we're going to return to and look at again, right? It's
Well, right, that's a different question though,
Right.
but just like stipends that we approve through, when you see a stipend listed in a grant, that is a funding source. And the funding source is used according to the CBA or according to the stipends document that we approved.
Okay, that's incredibly helpful. And then I think my second, what was my second general question? I can't remember what it is, so I'll stop there.
I have a second question, I guess. On the topic of stipends, Mariah, is it correct that when we see point people listed for the recipients of these grants, and then their stipend dollars included within the grant, is the grant money, if approved, go into a general fund that pays people out of for their normal salary based on a contractual agreement, and then it gets debited out of the general fund for the school, or are individual people actually paid through like a third party that gets the grant dollars and then knows to allocate it to the existing person who's doing that particular work that the grant was written for?
So the funds, the grant agreement comes to the district as basically an approval to spend. And so the accounts that you see in the far right column there,
Yes.
those are internal account codes. And the costs that are listed in the document are charged against them. The point person you see is the person who knows about the grant, and there's a staff member who I think is in OTL who manages the grant. Where are they, Susan? Are they in OTL?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're OTL right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're managing essentially the expenses charged to the different grants.
So the school, in terms of the finance flow, then, Susan, the money is paid from PSB to people based on a contractual agreement. If a certain percentage of their time, say half to make it easy, is being done, let's say for Metco, so half, we still pay them 100%, but we're assuming later we get reimbursed, essentially when the Metco money comes later, a portion of money that's exactly the same amount is transitioned over, so transferred over to the account that we took it out from to pay the person.
So when the revenue comes in for these grants, it goes into a separate fund, not
Right?
a general fund. And then if a person is 0.5 between the grant fund and the general fund, 0.5 is charged directly to that granted fund, and 0.5 is charged directly to the operating fund. So there's no money that moves actually between special revenue funds like that and the operating budget. The money is actually paid directly out of the funds we set up. And then when we do the quarterly reports, you'll see these very funds, for the most part, I'm saying in general, there's some exceptions. For example, this donation that's coming in goes right into the food service revolving account as
Right.
that's not typical, but it is the way that what particular one's handled. But typically they're set up in special revenue funds, and we hit those funds directly for those expenses.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any specific questions on the first generous gift for $80,000 to support Zero Waste Initiative? And I think this is the third year that we have received these funds, if I recall correctly.
It's the third and final.
Third and final. Okay.
And okay, it's the third and final, and so that sort of answers my question, because I noticed that this is going primarily to fund a salary. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
So there will need to be a transition plan if that position is to remain.
There's no
Okay.
requirement to, the grant was not, is not predicate, accepting this grant is not predicated upon you maintaining the position moving forward.
Mhm. Next item is the Metco grant for $2,387,684. Are there questions on the Metco funds?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions, Mariah. There's a item listed $10,000 for supplies.
Mhm.
Is there some kind of breakout of what all this, what this is, and that these supplies are used, I'm assuming, directly only for Metco students and not for the general classroom or something in which it's done? Somehow labeled, bucketed differently or boxed differently?
I think it's things like, I'll give an example. There's an end of year Metco celebration. So if they need to buy supplies for like that celebration or something, they could charge those kinds of things. But yes,
Do we-
it's dedicated Metco supplies.
So is there, like, I didn't have time to look up last year's, but if we looked up last year's, is there some accounting that says, yeah, we spent about that amount last year and that's why it's reasonable, or is it just a annual recurring ask for certain amount level of funding?
I don't
Like,
know.
is there
I
ever,
don't know if the Metco funds themselves were stable or have increased or decreased. Susan, do you know off the
I
top
think
of your head?
I think it's a slight decrease. It's not significantly different than what we anticipated.
Okay.
I gotta go back, give me a second just to go back to the, it's not scrollable where we are right now, so I gotta find the, my other,
Susan, do you think it's possible that for some of these recurring grants, we could get like maybe even on the cover sheet, just what the last year amount awarded was, and then for the current fiscal year, what our projected amount we expected to receive was? Because just talking about that now, it seems like really helpful information for context on these grants. These cover sheets are super helpful to like give us the big picture. I think those would be two additional pieces of information that are probably very available to staff and would help us understand as well.
Yeah, and we have that information. We're
Yeah.
looking all the time, but yeah, we can have that.
Thank you. That would be great.
yeah, so that, yeah, okay, so, because there was a different budget item in there somewhere about parties and end of year stuff, that's why I got confused about where the 10 grand was sort of going. The social workers, the full-time Metco advisors, is the understanding that a direct student support, that's TSER. It's like on page 5 of the 16. Is it accurate that all of these services are provided only to Metco students? There's no spillover or bridging over to other students or anything like that, even in group situations or anything?
Yeah, so there's been a little bit of a change from prior years in that they want us to be spending money, like we had in the past, had some classroom teachers on the grant.
Yes.
And we had assigned them based on, populations of Metco students in a school. But the awarding authority kind of pushed back on us. And so we've had to rethink how we're allocating costs. So for the social workers and the Metco liaisons, which are paraprofessionals, those 100% support Metco students. There are also some positions in there for like literacy and math specialists that
Yes.
support some other students, but are predominantly supporting all the Metco students in that particular school. So they were comfortable with that, but there are no longer any classroom teachers charged against the Metco grant because they've kind of changed their view on what they feel are costs they're willing to support through the grant.
Right. Okay. So to go back to Mariah, to go back to your answer, it actually shows up in 2 places, which is why I was confused when I read the multicolor thing, the 16 pages. If you look on page 15, under object code 06 other expenses, there's 10 grand there for 6 different student field trips and parties and stuff like that. And then like the senior send-off, sort of like the end of the year thing. But then earlier on, there's a different 10 grand that says, I'll find it, 05. It's on page 11. And on page 11, it says office and school supplies for students and staff use, $10,000. So that's why I was confused. I mean, it's basically, 2 different $10,000 items.
I think that the one that you see, like the Metco senior send off, those are not Brookline events. Those are Metco events where Metco students who attend Brookline go to Metco hosted events. Like those are for all districts, but you have to pay to attend them. That's my interpretation of what's going on.
And this item here, office supplies, we do have a Metco office. It has a director and a secretary, and they do prepare materials. And they have to run an office. So there's office supplies. This item here is for the office and school supplies that they're funding out of their for their program centrally.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, is it, Jesse, do you have more questions?
I'm searching for another note I made, but go ahead, Donna. I'm sorry.
I was gonna just pick up on something you said earlier, Susan, a few minutes ago about teachers not being covered. Maybe I read this packet incorrectly, but I thought that there were 4 teacher salaries included in the Metco grant.
Those are for the 2 literacy specialists and 2 math specialists. Those aren't classroom teachers.
Oh, okay, understood.
Yeah.
And so
They're educators, but they're not like a grade 1 teacher, grade 2 teacher, grade 3 teacher, etc.
So where it says on page 13, Susan, we support the district in funding teacher salaries who are full-time classroom teachers and serve Metco students. So isn't this a teacher who's teaching both? Like they're teaching a mixed, not a mixed, an integrated inclusive classroom, right? So I don't get says salary reflects correct placement on the district's collective bargaining agreement salary schedule for 4 full-time teachers. It's on page 13.
Yes. Those are the literacy and math specialists.
So they're supporting everyone in the classroom, right?
Yes, they do. They support all of the Metco students in that school. And some additional non-Metco students.
Right, so there are 4 teachers spread across, we're assuming not in the high school, across 8 schools
No, there's
that are funded?
no, there's 2 literacy specialists and 2, they're not across, they're in specific schools.
Okay.
So there's a literacy specialist and a math specialist in 2 of our schools that are funded through the Metco grant. Those ones were selected because the number of Metco students that they supported in addition to other students in the school were sufficient enough for us to feel it was justified to pay for it out of the Metco grant. In prior years, we did have some grade level classroom teachers funded from them. We had to make this switch because the Metco granting authorities pushed back and were not comfortable with us allocating the grant in that way. So we shifted it to literacy and math specialists this year.
And is the
But
number,
they do serve other students. They don't exclusively, in this case,
That was my question, yeah.
don't
Okay.
exclusively, right, in this case.
Right.
But they do touch all Metco students. When you have a classroom teacher, Metco students are sprinkled throughout the grades.
Of course, yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. So a classroom teacher may only, I'm just making these numbers up for illustration, right? There might be.
I just want to ask Susan that we don't spend a lot of time on this because we're already at 6 o'clock and we have to go through our budget updates too.
Good.
I feel like the question's answered, right? You got it, Jesse?
I got it, yeah.
Okay.
can
Anyone
I-
else have any more questions on Metco? Again, keeping an eye on the hour.
Yes, okay, so, and these could be quick answers, but is because of what you just said, is that why the teacher one salary on page 13 of 16 is a specific number, 77,948 versus a higher number? Because,
Yes.
It's like a particular person in a certain lane at a certain, level.
and is the number of teachers based on the number of Metco students that are in Brookline schools? Is that like proportional somehow?
We tried to target schools where the specialists were touching the most Metco students.
Okay, but and then my question about social workers, and I think earlier you mentioned paraprofessionals, are they also providing IEP services or they're providing other services?
They're providing services to the Metco students specifically.
And could those services include IEP services, or those are sort of paid for separately?
I would assume it wouldn't matter whether they're on IEPs or not, but I can confirm that and get back to you.
Okay. That would be, I'm just wondering if
Yeah.
yes, if it falls into like the caseload of, into that caseload, or it goes elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, Mariah, I just wanted to make an observation if I could. This is like the only time we have to discuss these things because we don't have like intermediate finance subcommittee meetings. So while I completely agree that we don't want to go late, this is our first opportunity to discuss a very complex set of materials that were only provided yesterday. So when else are we gonna like when else would we generally ask these questions and have an opportunity as a subcommittee to discuss them?
I hear you. However,
Right.
we don't have a lot of control in this. The state government and DESE has told us whether or not they're going to accept these things. And this has already been submitted and reviewed by DESE. So like it's a $2.4 million grant, and asking if there's a like breakdown of $10,000 in supplies to me is like focusing on the trees and missing the forest on something that we can't control how big the forest is or what we do with it because it's decided by the state. So I don't see a lot of point myself in like getting really far into this.
Into the details, I understand. Yeah.
Right. And I think that at a certain level, staff have decided how they're going to allocate these funds for maximum impact. And everyone is looking at balancing the needs of Metco students, understanding the challenges of the district and understanding the requirements of the grant. And we just should like move ahead with that that's my perspective on it. So it looks like a lot of money, and yet we have very little control over how it's spent, and the staff has already maximized and optimized that to the best they can. So that's why I don't think like we should. I mean, frankly, like the $80,000 a couple of months ago, members of the school committee like were having a huge some people were very focused on the fact that a different gift was being offered that would fund staff. And people didn't want to accept that, and in fact voted not to accept it. Now this one It seems like much more straightforward. So it's just interesting to me, like that one has much more flexibility in it, and it might be smaller, but we have more input on it.
Do you mind saying that? I'm not sure I'm following what you just said.
There was discussion about whether or not to accept a gift to bring back OEE staff, and multiple members of school committee were quite concerned about that, because what does it mean to accept a gift to fund staff? And yet we have a gift tonight that would fund a staff position. And all I'm saying is people had a lot of concerns about it before. They haven't necessarily been raised tonight. Those are the kinds of places where this committee can think about where its policy and position actually influence what the district does. The METCO grant, that is essentially a state entitlement grant and has strong restrictions on it and expectations, is not it.
So are you referring to the $80,000 grant that we just covered?
The gift, yes. It's a gift.
Sorry, I keep mixing up the
No,
language.
no, Donna, I think Mariah's referring to an earlier school committee.
No,
I know.
tonight's conversation, I'm saying that one is a parallel
understand
to
that.
an earlier gift that the committee spent a lot of time talking about.
Right,
And
in another
those
meeting.
kinds of things that is actually impactful when we dwell on these. So while we might spend hours reviewing, like the $2.5 million grant, you could spend hours reviewing this and asking all the details. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot for us to actually meaningfully impact on this.
Right, but I mean, as a committee, understanding what it means the first time through is helpful, and then in the future, we won't have these questions because now we know. So this is great.
But
Oh, but-
I do want to go back to that. I am a little bit, I'm more concerned by hearing that this is the third and final year of that salary position. And while the gift may not have specified that we need to retain that position, the community will have some concerns about eliminating that position. So, you know, I'm happy to keep talking about it because that is something that I was thinking about, which is specifically why I asked. Sounds like it's mainly a salary, that's mainly salary. And I don't know what the common practice is in Brookline or by the school committee to ensure that we are transition planning appropriately or that we're addressing the community's concerns, because it will be a loss.
But I think it's going to have to be a future discussion.
Right, exactly.
The,
Yeah,
the subcommittee can vote whether or not to recommend to the full school committee to accept that gift.
Right,
And beyond that, but it's something I mentioned earlier, right? There's a transition plan that needs to happen here. It needs to
Yes.
be like something, there's a decision point after this if we accept this grant.
yeah, totally.
Do you mean that
100%.
You mean the gift, right? Not the
Yes,
grant.
yes,
Okay.
thank you.
I was like,
Yeah,
I'm
100%.
confused enough, Mariah.
Betsy, I know, right? Betsy, can we go back up to the front page and look at the rest of the items to discuss? Okay, so we've talked about Metco. The next one is 139,874 for CFCE. I was confused by that, Susan, because Betsy, if you scroll down, the dollar amount on the actual award pages is not 139,874. It's like 70 something. So I don't really have like a dog in this fight. I just want to make sure that the record is what it's supposed to be.
There's two parts to it, Mariah. It's really
Okay.
odd the way it's set up this time, but there's two components to it. And in total, yeah, I don't know why it's done this way. I found it very confusing myself and said the same thing when I went through, and it was pointed out to me that there's two sections.
That's what I saw, but I wasn't sure if one was the revised budget of this. Like, I wasn't sure what was going
And I
on.
gotta add them together. It's weird.
When Betsy, is it possible on the cover sheet, like that we can have it split out? We can vote it just as separate, so anyone who's looking at the documentation doesn't have to have the same questions that we do. Who does the cover sheet? Is that Donna? Okay. Is
I'll
it
have
possible to
Z-
just have
I'll
it
have
split out?
Yeah, I'll have Z let Donna know tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you're
Just-
saying if you take all those subsections together, going all the way down.
No,
to
that's not what
18,
I'm saying. If you scroll down to the bottom of this page a little further, Betsy, it totals 70 something. And then if you go further, there's another, like if you go a little further, there's a second budget. This one, which then is 67 or
68.
there's something else here. I can't remember, and I'm not like,
Yeah, there's two
68,000.
parts to it, but
there's
yeah,
yeah,
I know what you're looking for.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, are there any questions on the CFCE grant? Just for anyone who doesn't know, this is like early childhood engagement and it's led through BEEP. It's sort of separate to BEEP, but connected to BEEP.
Right.
Yep. Looks great.
Okay,
Wait,
Can you
I
go-
actually, I did have a question. That's the one that had, literacy curriculum components to it, right?
I think so, because they do some in-home programming and some community programming, and it's for very small kids.
So I was just curious, whatever literacy instruction is sort of being built into that, is that somehow again, like aligned with the literacy changes we're making as a district, or what we're like, how do those two things work together? Or it's not important because it's,
I don't know, we could ask the question separately as like a literacy question, but
Yeah.
this is just if we're gonna approve the grant.
okay.
Yeah, it's like those park play groups and stuff like that, and
Yeah, like a reading time type of thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
So is it safe for me to assume that if it has any implications for students going into K1, 2, and that would impact any of their literacy instruction in school, that there
this
was,
doesn't affect that at
Yeah.
all. This is like 2 through 4-year-olds in the community.
Yeah.
Okay, we go back to the top. Okay, next is the nursing grant for 90,000. And we had a prior version of this, like this isn't new, this is multi-year, but this is, I guess, the latest increment of this multi-year funding, so. Can we actually approve future year? Like, can we approve 180,000, or do we have to only approve the 90 and then approve the second 90 next year, Susan?
Well, you can approve it all at once.
Okay. And then last, any
Fine.
questions on nursing? Okay, I'm seeing only shaking heads. And then the last one is the CTE grant for 73,278. Any questions on that? Okay. I'm gonna make a motion to approve all of the grants and gifts on the sheet. Is there a second?
Sure.
Okay, Donna, how do you vote?
yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Jesse,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And I guess my motion should have been to recommend approval of the full school committee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is going back to budget updates. Oh no, Pierce project. Do we have something written on that? I didn't see anything written on it.
No.
Okay.
No.
I just
Okay.
wanted to give you a heads up, that's all. So, back in May, our operations team sent out a survey to our rising 5th, 6th, and 7th grade families to see what their interest is in using our transportation services for their kiddos, so that we could get in front of, what are our needs? Do we need to change any of our programming to transport them over to the middle school primarily? And also I will say, we knew that the outgoing 8th grade was pretty small. So we wanted to kind of gauge what our ridership would be. So based on that, it looks like we're going to need to transport about 192 families. And this year it was 147. And so we're going to have to add an additional route. And so I just wanted to flag that and let you know. I'm going to be sending a memo to the Pierce Building Commission or committee to let them know that we're making this change too. It's just really more informative to let you know that we're going to be adding a route. When we don't think it'll have any cost impact overall in the budget, because when we put forward the budget, we had kind of a circuit breaker built in. Contingency, thank you, built in, so that if we needed to add vans or something to address need, that we could. So we're eliminating the van and just actually adding another run. So this will actually help significantly with ridership. And as you know, last year there was concern, and sometimes the buses got a little bit snug. It was never a safety issue, but with 45 more students, it just seems prudent to change the model up a little bit. Wanted to make you aware of that, so that when it goes to the commission, we talk about it there, you won't be going, why didn't we know? So I just wanted to let you know before submitting the letter to them, to just keep them up to speed on what's happening with our Pierce transportation. Again, I don't think it doesn't appear that it's going to have any impact financially.
Oh, that's good news, Susan. Thank you.
Yep.
Does that mean if it does have a financial impact, does that money come out of the building project?
All of this is funded through the building project, but I don't,
Okay, that's fantastic.
it seems cost neutral based on the estimates Joe and I put together.
You need to throw some salt over your shoulder, Susan.
Yeah.
Please.
So that was it. That's it. That's the update on that agenda item. The next item I did send Betsy, can you put up, I just wanted to share some preliminary, not that one, 25, FY 25. So, you know, the books are not quite closed for FY 25 yet, but they're pretty close. The comptroller, not all of the receipts have been posted by the Treasury office, the finance office, and they're still doing some work in the comptroller's office, trying to process all of the bills. So I don't have final numbers here, but we're pretty close. And so I thought you'd want to know kind of how did our deficit funding plan turn out in the end? And so, of course, we overspent our budget, and we had to use revolving funds. But we also had a spending freeze on the non-salary accounts, and we had a hiring freeze on the salary accounts. So in other words, things that we intended to purchase, we did not purchase. Positions we intended and hoped to fill, we froze and did not fill. And many of those positions that we froze, we ultimately eliminated in FY 26 during our budget deliberation process. So I thought you'd kind of want to see how it all, played out, at least in a high level. This might change slightly, but not in any significant way. And so I just wanted to share that with you. In the end, had we spent, according to the plan as was approved and didn't implement those spending freezes, then, we would have, our budget gap ultimately was about 2.1 million. But because we were able to kind of claw back some money in those areas, we didn't have to tap into the revolving funds at the level that we had originally considered back in February. So that's all that is. Well, I'll give you more detail. They'll finish closing out the books, and I think we have on the calendar in October that you'll get like the accounting of FY 25 and how it landed.
Mhm.
I wish I could give it to you now so that we could see 23, 24, and 25 spending against the 26 budget, but couldn't pull that off because, the town has not completed their work.
Does this zero out materials fee?
Nope. No, not quite.
Okay.
Spent the majority of material fees. It's tricky when you get into revolving funds because things like BEEP, you can only charge expenses that are related to our early childhood program against BEEP.
Mhm.
If it's not related, I can't just charge anything to it. And that's true with all revolving funds. There's restrictions on how you can use that. Material fee isn't restricted because the nature of it is that we collect fees that are, kind of like tuition fees, really, is how it's defined under the law. And so if we're,
So does the 324 represent the maximum that could have been charged against BEEP?
there, in terms of the expenses that we had, some of this is transportation that's related to BEEP students and then some salaries. Yeah.
So, but is it the maximum that could have been charged against BEEP?
Based on the expenses and the amount of overage we had. In other words, if you add the BEEP and the material fees, so that's money that we charged it outside of the operating budget, I couldn't have charged any more to BEEP for the types of expenses that we had
So yes.
that I have here. So yes.
Okay.
We have a bigger balance. So this is what I'm trying to differentiate, I guess. We have a bigger balance in BEEP than the 325,000. I just didn't
Right.
need to tap it.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to differentiate.
But of the eligible expenses, you maxed out what you could charge.
Yep.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
So are we going to look at the budget now?
Well,
Yeah.
no one has comments on this. Okay, let's keep going.
So we only
Right.
just have 10 minutes left, so
I
let's get
know,
Yeah.
but we only have one thing left, right? So.
That's
the
right.
big
We're
thing.
perfectly on schedule.
Yeah, yeah. So and like you have in the past, I wanted you to be able to start the year with where we landed by account. And so that's what I've done here. So I updated based on all of the changes that took place throughout our process, our budget process, as well as all of the changes in staffing that occurred since the budget was developed. And I wanted to provide you with kind of a starting point for FY26 after all of those changes. So that's what this is. So I wanted to provide it in the format that you saw it in the budget document itself. And so these are the tables recreated after all of the changes have been made for FY26. So this is your final FY26 numbers. And those are the numbers that we are going to be tracking expenses against during the year. So I just wanted to provide that to you. And the only other thing that I wanted to point out, Betsy, if you could go one page deeper. If you could scroll up for me.
Is Betsy there?
Don't know.
Oh, she's back.
All right. On the one of the things that I did differently on the tables, and this is so I could start to tie out things in a way that we haven't been able to in the past, is I always like to separate out salary from non-salary on the budget and give subtotals. So this is again, we're going through this like iterative process of 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 kind of improving our budgeting. And so that would be something that would be look a little bit different for you than what you saw in the budget document itself. So for the superintendent's school committee, if you go to the page, you'll see similar numbers if you look at the grand totals, but I'm now giving you subtotals, salary and non-salary, and then a total for the cost center. So that's the format we would be, the next iteration of our format updates moving forward. This will allow me to, when I'm doing projections against salary, to have the salary subtotals called out now, so that when we're doing the quarterly reports, you're starting from a, from a base, the baseline, and you can see what that number is. So I just wanted to, means nothing to anybody, but when you see your financial report, you're going to be able to see, oh yeah, that was the salary number we tied to. That was the final salary number that was approved ultimately. So you'll
Fair.
start to be able to see, across reports, some consistency that you hadn't been able to, we haven't been able to provide you and that you haven't seen in the past. So just wanted to point that out so that
Thank you,
nothing
Susan.
more.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you, Susan.
This is
Can we-
this is a big improvement.
Can we stop at OSS again? You were Betsy was there a second ago.
Oh,
I have questions about
Right.
that too, but
Oh,
like
sorry.
Sarah's
So
questions are probably my questions, so go ahead, Sarah.
do you want to go ahead, Mariah?
No, go ahead.
All right. So I'm looking at the out of district tuition and at the claims and settlements, and just wondering, are the claims and settlements, are the number that we see there, is that tuition at all? Or is claims and settlements only legal fees?
none of them are legal. The account, I know this gets confusing sometimes, but there's certain labeling that we have to use across accounts. And so claims and settlements as a category, this is not legal at all. There's no legal, this is all settlements that Karen spoke to you about as we were going through the budget process. So it's not legal. There are settlement agreements that were put into place because the regular IEP process did not result in an agreement between the families and the district.
So I'm going to ask the same question again because I still don't think I have it.
Right.
Under the line of claims and settlements, is there any tuition there?
if it was part of a settlement agreement, it would be here. Yes.
Tuition.
But
So
what else
There's
would it
out of,
include?
there's out of district tuition is one of our line items,
Yeah.
and claims and settlements is the other line item. Is out of district tuition line item complete accounting of tuition?
Except for those that were through a settlement agreement.
Okay,
We can get Karen to clarify, but that's my understanding of how they're separated out. But they are for tuitions. And then there's a third category that's out of circuit breaker. So to get the total cost of out of district tuitions, you have to add up those three numbers.
okay,
Now, what I was hoping for, and this is why I really wanted to give you the FY25, not budget numbers, but the expenses, is so that you could see a stronger correlation between the 25 and the 26 actuals. But unfortunately, the town hasn't finished closing the book, so I couldn't do that for you.
Yeah, that
Meaning
would
the
be-
25 actuals and the 26 budget.
right.
And then
That
you'd be
would, that
able
would
to
be
see.
super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been, but I didn't have it. And the other place that it would really be helpful is when we look at, if you look at tuition or transportation on this line, you can see it looks like 24 expenses is 4.5 million, and then it goes down in 25. It went down in the budget, but didn't go down in cost.
Right.
So if you could see the actual, then what you would see is that it went, that it was that was high, so that there was consistency. But again, I was really pushing hard to get you the 25 actuals, but I just, it was beyond my control to finalize that. But because then we could be having really interesting conversations about, trends and what does it look like in 26, and it would help inform what we were doing in 27, but we'll
So
have to,
when
As,
will we be doing that then?
October.
Okay.
And
Susan,
if I could just again just underscore what Susan just said, if you look at the tuition line that's in the budget, it's obviously too low. So clearly some of the tuition was covered in the circuit breaker. So I heard Susan say that some of the tuition is in the circuit breaker. But do you see how it's just low between FY25 and FY26?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so to get the full picture of the total expense that we're paying for out-of-district tuition, you need to look at that number that's budgeted plus whatever she charged against circuit breaker, and then whatever is embedded in that claims and settlements line. Right? Right, Susan? I just wanted to make
Perfect.
clear that, yeah, that is likely part of your structural deficit.
Yes.
Yes. Does that make sense to everyone?
It does.
Yeah, because she
Donna,
charged.
before you ask your question and before Jesse asks yours, this is related to this. Can you go up to the first page, Betsy? Because this ties to this question. When you look at total budget by cost center, student services here looks like it's dropped 400,000 from the FY25 budget. But
Right.
when we talked about our FY26 budget, there's a whole bunch of costs that are spread across the schools that are student services costs, right, Susan? And so, because if I recall, the student services budget actually went up by about, I don't know, 7 million at the end, netting. I think it was 9 million to start, and then it got reduced. I don't know where it landed. But I just think that it's helpful to understand, even though you're presenting this at a building-based budget and where the costs are, that there's like, it's interesting. I guess I'll say it's interesting that although we had this extensive conversation about it, the way this shows looks like the budget's dropping. And then if you go back to that other page we're looking at, it looks like, oh, out of district tuition is halved. And really, like, there's a lot more happening.
Right.
Due to what Bella just said, like pointing out that there's multiple sources of funding for these things. So it's just notable, I think, that so much of the conversation that we have had around budget in the past year, unless you have this sort of historical knowledge, it's not necessarily visible in this document. So something for us all to keep in mind. Jesse.
Can
I'm
you go
sorry,
back
Donna. Donna was
uh,
next. Go ahead, Donna.
Jesse, if it's about this topic, you can go ahead of me.
Yeah, it is. If you go back to the students OSS page again, Betsy, please. Yeah, I was just, one thing was the general supplies went from like a factor of like 7. So Susan, is that normal? I mean,
So the other thing that I want to point out too, that's going to be a little bit different is
Okay,
that there were some expenses that were broken out, not expenses, some budget items that when we presented were broken out by school. This is not teaching, okay? These are like our supplies and our contracted services had been split out between school as well as the district student services account. Karen had requested that in those cases, especially around contracted services, that they be brought back in to a centralized account for so that she could track them with better clarity. So there is some adjustment here in the FY26 that brings some contracted services that were not big money, but were being accounted for at some of the schools into the centralized account, so that we could keep a good eye on it.
okay.
Moving forward. So there is a little bit of an adjustment there.
Well, it's like more, yeah, well, it's.
But it's, so some of this, so the supply line is one of those areas that you're seeing it. Karen wanted to have a tighter control on it. And by having it, I guess what I'm trying to say, Karen wanted to have, and I agree with her that that was prudent, especially where we are right now, to really get a good sense of our costs and not lose sight of them because they're being split out in 4 different ways. That makes it difficult for you to get a true picture of the relationship between the contracts that we have in place and the costs associated with them. So anyways,
Okay, thank you. The other question had to do with if we're assuming that some students age out, other students come in, students are in the schools that didn't need OSS support and develop a need in some grade, let's say, for example. So my question is, if you take a look at professional staff, it's down $1.7 million, and administrative support for it's down about 75 grand. There's some stipend that comes in, the 4 times what it was in 24, the 100K. But this shows like it seems to be like a large reduction in staffing, or at least staffing salaries, and administrative support for what should be, or maybe a population of students for student support that's about the same as it was last year. So how do we explain the professional staff, significant decrease and along with the administrative support?
Some of this, again, I want to see how the FY25 actual, because there's some, and I'm doing some cleanup right now with some of these
Okay.
account codes. And one of the things that I've learned is like in these central office accounts, some of the old accounts were still being tapped instead of the new accounts. I actually was working with staff today to be
Okay.
able to clean up some of that. So I think some of it is associated with that. But until I get this final number on 25, then I can better explain to you how the 26, I know what's in the 26 number. I can tell you to the penny. I reconciled every single one of these. So I feel really good about what's in 26. Cleaning up the backwards looking information.
So, okay, so I guess asking the question a little differently, maybe,
Yeah.
I get like 20, FY23 may have been messy in its accounting, and that's why it's triple the number that's, in 26. But I guess the question from a community perspective would be, is the 1.097 million what's necessary to provide the same kind of level of support that we did last year?
Yes, because
Okay.
it's not in this district account, it's in the school accounts, as Mariah had mentioned.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's accounted for in one place or another.
All right.
It's just trying to get consistency across how it's being reported and what cost center. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's my recollection, Susan, that for example, hang on one second, Donna, that like say there was a staff position that was split between 2 schools. Previously, it had been appointed in OSS when really it should have actually been fractionally appointed
In 2 schools, right?
Is that correct? Is that
And it could be the other way around, right?
Okay.
They were assigned to a school 1.0, but they were showing up in a district account and they should have been in the school.
Right, okay. So it's
Yeah.
just really like it's like the okay.
Course correction.
Yeah.
So Mariah, are you saying that if we had an indent under professional staff where it
Mhm.
says 1.097 million, in theory, there could be indented under there 9 schools
That's
with
right.
their own contribution to additional approved budget that covers student support services?
If
Right.
you scroll to Hayes, Betsy, if you don't mind, just for one moment. The Hayes budget, if you look at it, just to give one example,
That's Lincoln, yeah, it's gonna be.
maybe that went too far.
There you
Whoa,
go.
there you go.
Yeah.
So if you look, for example, paraprofessionals has increased from 900 to 1.3 million. Professional staff has increased from 4.9 to 5.4 million. So this school has gone up, although they had level to flat enrollment, as I recall, by 900,000. And I think that's the kind of thing that you're seeing also. It's the reallocation of staff into the schools. And my guess is that a lot of this would be like, you know, rise costs and other things that are coming in here, being allocated out of OSS and into the school where they should have been to begin with. And I'm sure someone maybe thought back in the day, again, I'm projecting, oh, RISE is a district-wide program, but
Right.
it's located at Hayes in this case. So that's the kind of thing that I think Susan's pointing out. But again, when you go back to that first page, it looks like OSS, like our special education costs, or at least the costs that are incurred in OSS, oh, it's flat/down, when really our
Yeah.
conversation has been about quite different trends happening in the district.
So I guess, is there a way budget preparation display wise to get at what you just described? So that as the school committee and then the public, you know, looks at this, they're going to be very confused as like, where's all this stuff? So maybe there is a way to, you know, for student support services being such a huge component of the
Have a
budget.
matrix budget you're asking for?
Yeah, I mean, for student support, yeah.
Yeah.
If it's not too difficult to do.
But
Susan,
wasn't that
aren't there
wasn't that
sub-budgets?
given?
Aren't there building-based sub-budgets for student services? I thought there were, or like code.
What you get is, so when the complementary piece to this on the staffing side is the FTE that I give you, which is broken out by the number of positions, right? So that helps you to understand when you're having changes in staffing, and if you're adding programming, you would see a rise in FTE. One of the things that makes it tricky with teachers' salaries in particular is that you get sometimes the dollar value doesn't really tell you the story. And why might that be? Because if you move teachers around and you have somebody that's in a slot right now over here at Hayes, right? And their salary is at 120,000 when I start, but that person retires and somebody comes in at 80,000. Or that staff member that's at 120,000 gets moved over to another school. The cash amount, right? The expense amount doesn't really tell you the story.
But
It's your,
that's true at the individual level, but not at the aggregate level that we're
Right.
looking
Like
at.
the
Yeah,
school
So I
level.
guess the only question is there a way to separate out the student services expenses by building in addition to those that are charged directly to OSS? Because we saw that
not
last year.
without doing it manually.
I see.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay.
Not
It's
without
just one of these things, Mariah, that came up at a couple of our conversations at expenditures and revenue, in that this particular student services component with this, which again, I said earlier, is such a large component of the budget and variable to some degree. It's the more, we don't want to shine a light on it to like say something's wrong about it. No, we're giving support to students who need support, but accounting for it so we can see what's happening. I like Susan's both ideas. It should be there by FTE and by number and by dollars. That way we can get a sort of a fair picture of how many people are toiling away, right? And also know something about how much money we're spending. Like
To the extent there's a different cost increase trajectory, I think it would be very valuable to be able to disambiguate it within the buildings.
right.
So
I
for
think-
our own financial projections.
One of the things I can look at, but I don't think I can pull it off for right now with everything else we have going on, but I can look at, and I've done this before, it's not set up to do this right now, but maybe looking at it across programs. So like I have it by cost center, then I have it by line item. I don't know if the Munis account code system can accommodate another segment, but I'm wondering if I can look into, can I actually recreate it by program?
I thought the coding did someone told me at one point, I thought that there was a section of the code that could tell you.
It could, but only if it's with Fidelity.
Sure, if people haven't coded stuff
done.
correctly, that's a different question.
I know. Well, I'm trying to get this format
Yeah.
coded correctly in the backside. Because right now the Munis reports won't print in the format, right? And I'm trying to work with the town to get that that so I can print a report, actually to the point of the CLA report, right? If we can't print a clean report out of Munis that aligns to our account code structure, then what you have to do is dump it and you have to manipulate it to get it to do that. And I'm trying to get Munis, which has been a problem for 20 something years here,
Yeah.
not being able to get reports out of Munis that fit into the school DESI kind of format that the rest of the school districts use. So
Okay.
I'm trying, but there's, it's progress at this point. But
I think I think if
we
you
can
peg it
put
as an
that, we
action item.
can put a pin on that
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we come
That's
back to
exactly
that.
it.
Let's refine what we have and then let's
Yes.
go to the next level of sophistication after that. But
Yeah,
I mean,
just
this-
like when these kinds of reports are put out without context as a cover page, like they
Right.
start to tell their own story that isn't necessarily the accurate one. So we're talking
Exactly.
about it now, but anyone who doesn't watch the tape doesn't know. So
Right.
there's that.
well, then
Donna?
there's that, right?
Yeah.
Probably why people didn't give you these reports before.
Okay, I have a few questions. This is incredibly helpful. So.
And I just want to flag time too. We're already
Yes,
10
I was
minutes
gonna
over.
say, I'm very
And I
mindful.
have an odious hate of going over time. So
Yeah. Okay, I want to make sure I understood what you said, Susan, correctly. And I know OSS has sort of been a huge issue over the past, God knows how many months. So am I understanding it correctly that contracted services are now under general supplies on that OSS page?
No, I was using that in an example about why you might see an
Oh,
increase
okay.
like that. Yeah, and that supplies was one of them that Karen wanted to pull
But that
into
doesn't
one place.
necessarily, okay. But so for example, where would contracted services sit?
It should sit in the OSS budget as well.
professional technical services, Donna, the
Oh,
second
okay.
line. See how it went from 0 to 1.5 million?
And I thought at
Oh.
some point each school had
They did, but that they do. It's just pulling out of the schools the OSS portion of that. And I see something that looks suspicious to me too, because the FY25 budget did have online books. So I'm going to have
Books,
to
yeah.
talk to Diane about what her table did here. And this is the thing that we were talking about before, where when you have to dump the data out of Munis and recreate it in pivot tables in order to get us into this format, sometimes it comes over in a wonky way. And that looks odd to me that I didn't catch that before I sent it to you.
Yep.
okay.
Because it wasn't, professional and technical services in 25 was not 0, and neither was online book subscriptions and tools. So I don't know why it's showing up 0 here. So that gives me something I have to look at. And I'll talk to Diane about when she gets back from vacation, though I'm on vacation next week. So we'll try to get this clarity on that.
Betsy,
what
can
When
you
we
about-
post
present the
this thing?
FY25 actuals. That's weird.
Betsy, can you pull this PDF off of the meeting materials and just like say like it's being double checked or something?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, that way the link's not totally dead.
Something
There's just
didn't
no
pull
replacement.
correctly there, because that's not true. We know that there were expenses in FY25. Why didn't they budget? Why didn't they show up
Okay.
when this pivot table was run? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that.
Okay. And then what's the difference or what differentiates the paraprofessional that's sitting on the OSS page from from like the paraprofessional and the $74,000 for the FY26 approved budget versus a paraprofessional that's in, for example, like Lawrence FY26, $835,000.
So the paraprofessionals that are showing up in the schools are the ones that are attending to the needs of students in that school. There are a variety of different categories of paraprofessional in the paraprofessional contract. So that's your unit C. And so, for example, and I'm hoping I'm recalling this correctly, there is like a PT assistant. All right, that's in the paraprofessional contract. I believe it's PT assistant. And that would be something that would be showing up as a paraprofessional in the OSS paraprofessional line here.
Okay.
Okay.
Because they're a district-wide position, you mean?
Yes, because they serve students not just in one school.
I
And
think
it's,
it's an OT assistant. Pretty sure it's OT.
It's an OT. It's
Yeah.
OT. It's one of those, yeah.
Yeah.
OT, PT, I'm not.
okay, that makes sense. And it's, tell me if this is also true. I mean, it's true in my experience, but I don't know if it's true in real life. A paraprofessional in a school building isn't only a paraprofessional that is part of an like IEP, but we have employed paraprofessionals who are not just providing IEP services, right?
At the school level, you also have paraprofessionals that are in kindergarten and first grade, in addition to OSS.
Okay, so if at some point you needed to delineate what was associated with IEP services, you can do that by just, there's a way to do that. Okay. And then my other question when I was looking at this was on the stipends extra comp numbers. Is the reason BHS's stipend extra comp number so much bigger because of the athletics?
Yeah. And they have a much more robust co-curricular programming. So they have all those advisors for clubs and everything that are significantly, and would always be, it's not just it's any high school would have more clubs and athletic programs than an
Okay.
elementary school would.
Okay. Is there, this is a more general question, but if there were any changes to the approved budget amounts for FY26, am I remembering correctly that discussion happens quarterly when you like produce some sort of report? I can't remember what it's called.
Quarterly report.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. There we go.
Sort of and sort of not. Like
Okay.
we sort of get like a snapshot of expenses against the budget, but say I'm making this up, BHS overspends their technical services or the district as a whole or someone, or they ask to reallocate funds, that does not come to us.
Okay. So money can move freely between cost centers, and the school committee might not be aware of that because that's an operational thing. Is that right?
In general, there isn't a lot of money that's moved around between the accounts. What does happen is that because we're going through this, process of moving to a different chart of accounts, sometimes money is budgeted on one line, but the expense is showing up in another line. And so we might make adjustments and see budget modifications for those reasons, but there isn't a lot of moving around of money. I do not move salary money around at all during the year because I want to track where the variances are. And if I start moving the budget number around, then it kind of obscures my view a bit about how I'm tracking. So I never make transfers on the salary side. So this was so that when I'm doing a projection,
You're not on mute. You might want to go on mute.
so there isn't a lot of shifting.
Betsy,
Yes,
you're not on mute.
thank you.
Yep.
So, Susan, I have another sort of question, and maybe we take this into the next meeting, but at some point, can we get some more insight into like the VP situation at each of the schools, and like how many VPs are, because wasn't there remember last budget at the,
I think we'll get a staff update at full school committee from Bella at the beginning of the year, if
Oh,
that's
great.
what you're
Okay.
asking. I
yes,
would presume Bella, like that's historically when there's been like leadership transitions or new people. Like we
Right.
get a
I think
presentation.
Dana, I wonder, I'm sorry, I think Dana is just wondering because we eliminated a VP at Driscoll. Is that
Right,
just
I'm
all you
wondering-
were wondering about?
yeah, I'm wondering
Okay.
if it's sitting in these numbers, like is that reflected in the FY26 numbers?
Susan would
I-
know. I assume not.
If
So
it was
that's
cut,
gonna
it's no
be-
longer in the budget here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions on this? We're 20 minutes over, so my timeliness.
You're still
Desire
smiling
for
though, Mariah. That's
timeliness.
pretty good.
The more I freak out, the more smiley I
Oh,
get.
yeah, okay, now
Okay.
I just
that
want to
all?
be respectful of everybody's time, that's all.
yes.
Yes.
This was, I know that I took up a lot of time asking questions, so I appreciate all your patience,
It's
especially,
important knowledge.
yes.
And thank you, Susan, to you and the team for preparing that document. While, as you say, there might be some like glitches, I think having that level of transparency at the building level and everything else is really helpful. So I'm really appreciative of the kind of detail that lets us like understand how it's all going to bake into the budget and seeing that comparison going forward. And then in October, seeing the actuals. It's wonderful.
As long as we can get those pivot tables to like.
Don't blame the pivot tables. There's something in the data. Do not besmirch the good name of my friend Pivot. So
You and I are always.
I know. Not Pivot's fault.
It's not Pivot's fault.
Anyway, I think we had one more item that was just reviewing dates, but that's such a simple thing and we can pick that up with priorities at our next meeting for our FY27. So we'll skip that thing and we will conclude tonight, unless there's any last words from anybody. Okay, have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.